Christians. My friend here says that he wonders what it means when Moses would put a veil on his face when he would give the law to the people. Moses was in the presence of God, obviously, when he received the 10 Commandments, when he received the 2 tables of stone. He was up in the mountain, Mount Sinai, when he received the law, and being in the presence of God, he obviously incurred the glory of God being in his presence. So when Moses came back down from the mountain with the law and the tables in his hands, the people couldn't look at him because the brightness and the glory of God shone in his face. But in order for Moses to be able to confront the people and present to them what he had received from the Lord, it was needful for him to cover up his face so that they could look steadfastly upon him in the law that God had given him. And he would continue doing this, putting the veil over his face until such time that the glory of God that shone on his face would eventually subside and disappear. But what did this signify? This signified something very important. This signifies that the law, like the glory of God that shone on Moses' face, would eventually disappear. It would fade. And it would no longer hold the glory that it should hold because of the sin of men, not because of the lack of glory on the part of God or the law that he gave. The fading of the glory of God on Moses' face is an indication that the impact or that the usefulness in the law for man's salvation would also eventually fade. The law would not be the grounds whereby men could actually be saved. So men could not look upon Moses for salvation, no more than they could look upon the law of God that Moses gave for their salvation. The idea that you could be saved by the law would be a perspective that would eventually prove ineffectual because of the sin of man, as I've already said. However, Christ came, and he came in the form of a man, and he came in a way where he could present himself, render the law of God more illustrious, showing the spiritual nature of what is required in order to keep the law, which makes it even more impossible for man to keep the law when you realize that it is even more spiritual than just what the precept outlines that men comply with outwardly. God says, Christ told us and taught us that it is not just the outward keeping of the law that men must do, but they must keep the law of God inwardly, which makes it even more ineffectual on the part of man to be saved by law keeping. So God sent his son, draped in human flesh, so that we could steadfastly look upon him and see that our salvation has the enduring quality that is necessary for man to have an everlasting salvific relationship with God. We will be able to look upon Christ through eternity, and the glory of him and the glory of his word and the glory of his salvation and his holiness would never fade. But the law and the glory of it that shone on Moses' face, that faded. But the glory of God's holiness and his glory in the face of Christ will never fade. And our salvation is assured because that will never fade. And we will always be able to look upon him in his face for eternity. Be provoked and be persuaded.